Welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. In this podcast, we inspire advisors with ideas and pathways to break through barriers and build a thriving retirement income business. We will interview innovative technology developers, business leaders, and successful advisors, then help you organize and execute these ideas to move your business forward.
Hey folks, this is Jack Martin. I'm the virtual CMO for InsureMark. I want to welcome you to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast today. This is where leading advisors in our space are coming each episode to learn how they can level up their business. And so today, what I thought we'd like to talk about is leadership. And so as I was telling Ron in the warm-up, there's only a handful of guys I can think of in the space who really have firsthand great experience, maybe have their thumb in a couple of different pies, and understand the leadership concept. And so Ron was kind enough to carve time out of his busy schedule. This is Ron Shurts. Ron, why don't you tell the two or three people who are going to hear this who don't know who you are, what your story is?
I think one of them does, but the other two don't. So Ron Shurts, co-founder, CEO of Annexus, and Jack and I have known each other for a long time and knows that I have a lot of different businesses in this space. And to give a little bit of backdrop, that the last time I got a W-2, I was 16 years old putting up chain link fence. So since then, it's been eat what you kill. And so without that, without leadership and direction and vision and grinding, we're not sitting in this seat. So we've had a lot of success in the FIA space and the IUL space. And my primary firm is Annexus, and we're a product development company. So we actually invent the widget, we invent the FIA and the IUL, and we put it on the insurance company's paper, which I'm sure we'll talk about along the way here, but that's just kind of a little bit of a setup.
Yeah, that's a great backdrop. So you got a pretty diverse portfolio in the space. Okay, so Annexus is the brand that most people recognize, but as you move into different facets of financial services, and you're looking at your enterprises, what are you looking for from your team in terms of leadership? Well, let me back up. What's leadership mean to you?
Well, I think this is very very one-on-one for me. I mean, this is back when I'm playing football in high school and junior high and being the first guy on the field, last one to leave. I mean, honestly, it's that fundamental to me, right? And we'll talk about grinding it here, and I'll tell you some stories along the way here. But for me, that's the leadership. I mean, you lead by example, and people follow you for doing that. And at this point in time in my career, 35 years later, I mean, that hasn't changed. And I think that's what leadership is. And the other thing is that I think, treating people with respect and treating people with this mutual feeling and a partnership feeling, no matter what level they're at for us on any employee, has been really successful for me. And it doesn't always work out, and people pass and we move people out, and but I think that's part of that leadership thing is setting an expectation and leading by example. So goes way back to the day, back in the day when I was a kid, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, that's a great starting point. And so as you're building your teams, or you're acquiring your teams and so on, what are there attributes you're looking for? Besides treating people with respect and leading by example, what are you expecting your leaders to be doing in order to drive successful businesses?
Well, I mean, obviously, it all depends on their role, right, and exactly what they do. But again, it seems it's a simple play for me. I set expectations for people, and just little dumb things like if you're supposed to be here at 7, don't come in at 7:01. Does 7:01 change the success of the day or the week of the year? The answer is no, but it's disrespectful, and we expect people to do that. And I just think that people start to fall in the line a little bit about that kind of a culture. And as you know, Jack, I mean, we hire corporate people all the time, right? I mean, that's our breeding ground. We bring people from corporations. I bring people from places. I just hired a gal to run distribution for my fintech company, and she was 23 years at another company, and it's corporate, right? This is the way we have always done it, and she's brilliant. She'll be great, but it's really coaching those people up about get into an entrepreneurial culture. And I kind of refer to it as an entrepreneur, right? You get to be an entrepreneur inside of the walls of a company, that we're not having meetings to have meetings. Let's have a meeting and talk about when the next meeting is going to be. And so we expect people to lead that way. And, as they start to build out their teams, and a lot of the companies that I have outside of Annexus, some have been startups for sure, and that are really successful. And in a lot of cases, they're a little bit of a Shark Tank play for me. So we're able to go in there and take equity in companies that have had good leadership, and then we just need to upgrade the culture. So that it's a big word. It's a big word. It's hard to do, but I think that it's all part of our culture, getting people to think that way.
No, that's great. You've got your finger on the pulse a little bit of what's going on in some of the sports world, right? And so when you talk to whether it's college kids or pro guys, you know the things don't always go perfectly, and so I'm sure there's times when the coach or you are saying, "Hey, come on, show a little leadership." So what's that? What do you think you and the coach are saying whenever you're talking to your players about that? So,
And again, I keep going back to this. It's kind of fundamental, right? I mean, yeah, so I know a little something about the sports world. I don't know a ton. I'm not deep into it, but as you know, I've got the arena football team here in Arizona, and we just won a championship for number five here a couple weeks ago. And then I took a little equity position in a football team, Jack, not a soccer team, a football team in Venice called Venencia, and just came public a couple weeks ago that Drake actually bought equity in the team too. So that just hit the wires here in the last couple of weeks. So I know a little something about that, and I know a little something about the private equity that's playing in the college space. As you guys know, that I actually been on the inside of that for probably a year and a half. Um, but back to the fundamentals. It's kind of fun being in those locker rooms and seeing the things that actually represent exactly what we do in our businesses, right? And obviously that's a lot of rah rah, but it's still the first one on the field, last one to leave. A lot of similarities. There's also a lot of similarities in teams that don't win. There's also a lot of similarities in teams that, like companies that don't win. There's a lot of similarities on cultures in the sports world that don't win. And I've seen them, I've been around them. And it's still back to, you know, people with leadership and people winning. And the parallels are damn near exactly. I mean, you look at some of the, not to pick on anybody, but you look at some of the NFL teams as an example. Again, I'm relatively familiar with the majority of them. The ones that don't ever win, there's a reason why they never win, and there's a reason why other people win, right? And as you know, Bruce Arians is a good friend of mine, and when BA was here in Arizona, and he ended up leaving and took the Tampa job. Um, Tampa hadn't won for a long time, and when he was in Arizona, he took a pretty bad culture and turned it into a 13-3 team, and got to the conference finals before the Super Bowl. It's just not a. It's not. There's a reason why when he went to Tampa, in his second year, he gets a ring, and so that's just people being leaders, and but a lot of parallels, a lot of similarities.
yeah, it's interesting. So we had Kevin Elko, who works with the Eagles and worked with Nick Saban down in Alabama, on a few episodes ago, and one of the things he shared was this tattoo that Jalen Hurts has, which speaks to a little bit of leadership. If I get it right, I think it says, um, "The storm suits me. I'm not built for the calm." So that's an Andrew Jackson quote, right? And you start to think about that. So, there's adversity, right? There's adversity in our business today. Maybe less adversity, with the stay on DOL, et cetera. But there's a lot happening, in our space. And so, good leaders have got to be able to walk towards the gunfire, right? So, how do you spot that characteristic? How does someone uh, uh, become that that kind of personality, or is that even possible that wants to walk into the storm and deal with the adversity? What do you think?
Well, I don't ask to look at anybody's tattoos. And I, and I personally don't have one. So I think what he's thinking, I just didn't have it inked on myself. I can tell you that, my executive team here at Annexus is, I mean, they're rock stars, right? And they've been around for a while. And I've also had people here that just, that in my other companies just aren't capable of it, right? To walk towards gunfire. But it's definitely something I preach. It's definitely something I teach. It's definitely something we said, that adversity brings opportunity. And I know that sounds easy, but it's like, hey, one of the hottest products in the country that we created at Annexus, we created during the pandemic. Um, it's out on North American right now, and we created on during the pandemic. I mean, like, okay, we can sit around here and feel sorry for ourselves and act like we're, going to be sick and stay home, or we can get something done and pull a full product development slot out and did a deal with North American and never even met them. And that's one of those small times, and even some of the things we've done culturally that we actually did during that pandemic time, and that was one of those things that, hey, and to be real honest with you, a lot of us were looking at, looking around the room, just in general in our business, are we even going to be in business, a year or two from now, right? And fortunately for me, I wasn't under as much pressure because I can lock the door and go. But I also know that a lot of the people that work for us couldn't, and their families couldn't. And because of that, we took it head on, and and we did chase it. And I think our business has doubled since the pandemic, because of the time we took during the pandemic, during the adversity, and stepped up. And to your point, we chased it down. We just chased it down. So we're going to go get it done and continue to grind it out. So not everybody can do that. People can talk about it, but not very people can pull it off.
That's true. There's a lot of talk the talk, but when I remember during the Great Recession, and the credit crunch, and our carrier's going to have product, and what's that world going to look like? That was a great opportunity as well. Coming out of the pandemic with the product you've designed and that sort of thing. So, you're a lot of people say, adversity breeds opportunity, but it's real, and it takes, you got to have a little bit of steel, to really pursue that, right? So,
Well, it's not the time to hide, right? I mean, real leaders. I mean, it's not time to hide. It's the time to step up. It's the time to be in here earlier. It's the time to stay later. It's the time to be around and be accessible and figure out different ways to communicate. And we actually did a better job during the pandemic to actually start communicating as a team, and having much more consistent communication amongst one team to the next, because we weren't seeing each other, right? And so instead of passing you in the hallway, it had to be a little bit more organized, and we continue to build that culture. But yeah, I mean, back in the capital crunch, you remember, I mean, we were doing business with Aviva at the time, and Aviva had terminated 45 IMOs and 40,000 advisors. And I was able to get in there from a partnership perspective, and they created enough capital for Nexus to continue to build product and grow. That was one of those situations where it was pretty bleak, when companies are stop taking 1035 exchanges, cash only, we're out of capital. Everybody's trying to grow, and we're trying to stay in business. And that's another one of those opportunities that we took head on, and we came out of that. Shortly thereafter, Athene came in and bought Aviva, and we were on kind of a hockey stick play, and then Nationwide out of nowhere calls and say, can we want to be in the space with you? And that's turned into a $6 billion relationship this year. And so, and that's all part of those times that when things get a little bit tough and things get a little bit rough and you get banged around, that's the time you have an opportunity to excel. And,
yeah,
at that time, if we lay down, right, if we lay down during the pandemic and don't do some things that can help us get out of it, our business isn't doubled,
yeah,
basically in 3 years.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what you're saying. Bruce was doing with the culture in Arizona. I mean, he was walking into that. It wasn't a surprise that the locker room was probably a little bit of a hot mess, right? And so that
Maybe
wasn't a very
understatement.
well kept secret.
No, probably the understatement, right? He goes and gets the
Yeah.
rickety.
So
He gets your rickety guy Carson Palmer, who having no success, and all comes down here. He comes down here under BA's tutelage, and all of a sudden, right?
boom, all
Funny
pro
story
again.
about Larry Fitzgerald. Dude. He's playing wide receiver, and BA says we're not going to have you play wide receiver anymore. I'm going to move you into the slot. Nobody knows this, right? Moves him into the slot, and Fitzy will tell you to this day, um, he said, BA changed my life. We all remember Fitz being the greatest receiver, one of the greatest receivers ever, but he comes into the slot, probably catches another 400 or 500 balls or 300 balls, whatever the heck it is, in that slot position. So that's the adversity, and that's the leadership, and that's the you step in there and you start making some different decisions and growing, and good things happen.
Yeah, and so in that case, and I think to the extent, with what you said about Great Recession and pandemic, you got to think outside the box a little bit. And I know that that's a little bit of a trite thing, okay, but you got to be able to see the field. I mean, firefighters talked about this tunnel vision thing they get, when they're under stress, and I think one of the attributes of leaders is they've got the ability to say, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to open up the peripheral vision so I can see the field, right? What do
Yeah,
you think?
I actually and I don't want to use this as a parallel that I'm Tom Brady. Um, but I can tell you in this space, in this business, I absolutely see the field. And I make I use an analogy that some people know how the watch is built and some people know what time it is, and very few people know both. And I've been fortunate to be able to understand how the widget's built and also understand what time it is. In other words, I can see the field, and if I need to get down in the nitty gritty, and that's that. Some of that's natural after all these years, but at the same time, it's not natural because it's all about the extra time and effort and surround your people with really smart people and yourself with smart people, and that's what we've been able to do. And um, yeah, just see the field, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's really allowing your natural curiosity to come back up. I mean, so a little bit of that is stifled, from a corporate perspective. They don't want you chasing down rabbit trails, stay focused on the deal, be on task, yada yada. But it's hard to have that vision if you aren't curious. How's that work? And how can I use that? And so to a certain extent, that's what we've been able to do in our firm. There are things we've been able to take from other industries, uh, processes, technologies, data, those kinds of things, and bring them into the financial services and see pretty interesting results, pretty in a positive way, just by being curious. How does that work? Maybe that can work over here. And so I think that's an attribute you look for in a leader, right? They got to be curious.
No question. But I can tell you that in corporate America, and I've never had a job before, so I'm just kind of making this up. But in corporate America, it, you don't have to be as curious because you're going to get paid. I mean, you may eventually lose your job. I got that part, but you get paid next week. You get paid
Right.
next month, right? You've got your 401k, you've got these other things. I've never gotten paid before. I never had a job. So I'm like, either you get curious and figure some stuff out, dude, or you ain't paying the rent next week, right? And this goes way
Right.
back in the day. And that's what happens with the new startup companies that I've done and new partnerships that I've created where I've taken equity. I'm just like, we got to figure something out. I mean, this thing is not going to work. And I think in corporate, I do think you get stifled. And one of the things that I talk about consistently is I've never set a goal. I literally have never set a goal. Like, oh, we're going to grow 10%. We're going to grow X. I'm like, stop. You know, if you're grinding it every day, doing your thing, you come prepared that, if you hit your supposed goal in August in corporate America, you're like, huh, I accomplished something. Didn't accomplish anything. It was just a bad goal. It's just a bad goal. You did what everybody else does. Back to your curiosity part, right? You're like, hey, what if we did this? what if we just went out and just had one hell of a morning, and we had one hell of a day, and one hell of a week, and a big month, and a big quarter, and pretty soon you wake up at the end of the year going like, holy cow, we doubled, right? I guarantee I wasn't thinking about doubling between now and then, since the pandemic was over, and doubling our business, right? But I think the curiosity from my perspective is, I don't know if you want to call it curiosity, Jack, or scared to damn death. We're like, I don't
Well,
know.
that's the motivator.
I know, right? Scared to death. You got to figure something out. I mean, makes you pretty damn curious. If you're not going to get paid, or your payroll checks are going to bounce back in the day, you're like, hey, become pretty damn curious. So I think that's part of. I think that's all part of it. Is like, you figure something out, right? And that's the other beauty about me being, so experienced at this point in time and being surrounded with really smart people is. Again, if curious is the really appropriate term, a lot of curious people in here, and we got them out of corporate, get them to think a little bit different, and say it's not okay to grow 10%. It might be okay to be flat. It might be okay to be down 10%. I don't know if you're doing all the little things right, but it's not okay for me to have a cap, if you will, at the 10% number, and you actually think you accomplish something. And in corporate, I don't know, you know the terminology. They have like what do they call it when they set their goal? They call it plan. Oh, when I got my plan is to be up 8%, right? Well, they get down to the end of the year and they've hit the plan by September. They're like, holy shit! If I sell any more, they're going to make my plan bigger next year. How kind of counterintuitive is that? Oh,
Totally,
if we
totally.
make more money, then I'm going to have to be more next year, right? So I'm like, how about if we just go out and grind it, And I guess to use your term, be curious and try and figure out different ways to do things.
Well, I think another way of looking at what you're saying is, you got to think about winning. Okay. I mean, you're going to win the day in a sense, right? What can I do today, to win this day? What is at least one thing I can do? And it's interesting when you talk to advisors who are really at the top of the heap, okay? They don't look at a year with a goal. They're looking at really short periods of time. And, they've said, for me, 4 quarters equals 90 days. I've got to win the game in 90 days, and then I'm going to reset and roll forward. And I always thought that was really a powerful way to start to get over this plan thing you were just describing. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think, everybody works on this damn calendar year. Where's the calendar year come from? How does that matter? Right? Oh, you didn't hit your goal, between the first and the 31st, at the end of the year, but yet 30 days later you doubled your business because it was all the
Yeah,
work that you did the previous 12 months, right? I mean, so it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
where to your point is how do we look at this, this success and I to your point about the top advisors, I mean, they're not wired that much different. I mean, they're all kind of the same, right? They all looked at the way they do. Granted, they have different expertise and different levels of intellect and capabilities. But I mean, from a pure grind perspective, it's pretty damn consistent about people what they think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so you've used the G word 3 or 4 times, and so let's let the audience in on the secret. So talk about Ron Shurts and what embracing the grind, respect the grind. I think you've even trademarked a version of this. So let us in on the play here.
Yeah, well, I actually trademarked a little term called control the grind. We call it GTC, and actually, Coach Rural, Nebraska head coach now was at the Panthers, and he was at Baylor and Temple before that. And he's the one that actually said GTC to me because I was saying control the grind. I went and spoke to the players, control the grind, and he started texting me GTC, and he started showing. And this is not a representation, by the way, on how bad they were last year that because they were using GTC, right? Now, it might be. It might be a representation of how good they're going to be this year, though. Just so let's leave that bookmark for now. We'll talk about this in December. But the concept is when I do speaking engagements. I don't do it for a living, but I do it. I did 3,000 people in Vegas here a few months ago, and one of the things I talked about was, what can you control? really, what can you control in your life? And I said, no hands. I get, you can control your attitude and all that stuff. I get all that part. And I said, you can't control where you come from. You can't control who your parents were. You can't control the environment. That might be good or bad, right? You came from someplace different. I said, what you can control though is you can control the grind. You can control how hard you work. And if I'm sitting next to somebody and I'm outworking you, I'm probably going to win. I mean, you're smarter. You run a 4.3, I run a 4.7. I got it. That's fine. But at some point in time, I'm going to win that battle. So I talk a lot about control of grind. Back to a minute ago, we talked about having great mornings and great days and great weeks. And if you control the grind at some point in time, and I tell the story about pumping the pump right at the farm. And I said, I just did this a couple months ago at a group, and I said, how many pumps does it take to get the water out? Like, I don't know. We're getting guesses. I think it's 10. I'm like, what if it's 60? I don't know. Maybe it's 3. And maybe today it's 3 and tomorrow it's 100. I don't know. But I know this. If you ever stop pumping the pump, I can assure you the water's not going to come out. And so that's one of those things that if you can control the grind, if you can GTC it, according to Coach Rule, good things are going to happen. I actually spoke to the team here a couple weeks ago, and I had said kind of the same concept. I said, we don't play football games. We don't play games. We play a play at a time. If you can play a play at a time, you're probably going to be okay. And you're not going to be the moment's not going to be too big either, right? So back to control the grind, and that's what I talk about. It's just I wish there was an easier answer, and whether that's in the classroom for the kids, which I talked about, right, or wherever you're at in your career, in your life, in your business, and whether you own your own companies or not, it's still kind of back to the same fundamentals. So GTC.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I don't want to throw rocks at the corporate world, but it's pretty easy to outwork those guys. They don't embrace the grind.
I guess I'm gonna go back and start using your word curious. I mean, you can't be. You're not curious because you get paid. You get paid. You get paid to be mediocre, right?
100%.
And I bless my insurance company partners and all the people we work with there. They just get paid, right? I'm like, I don't get paid if I don't win, right? And so it's always a slower pace in the corporate world, and that's why the guys that are really gamers accelerate to the top levels, and that's why the guys that are gamers typically get out of that deal and go find someplace else where they can go play in Ron Shurts' world and go make something happen and be curious, right?
100%. So we're way over time. I'm sorry, and this has been a great conversation. And for those of you who've been listening, I hope you've been taking notes, because I think we've come up with 7 attributes of what a leader looks like just in this casual conversation. So if you're a leader, those are things for you to look at internally. If you're looking for leaders, those are things for you to look for. Certainly, it's a way for you to think about how you attack the day, attack the business. Anything you want to say? Any parting nuggets of wisdom you want to leave the audience with?
No, I think I don't know if you made this comment when we first started, and maybe before we got on air here, and by having any notes. I know nothing. I know nothing except for what I know, right? And so, everything we talked about here is from the hip, from the heart, from the head, from the gut, all the above. And it's just things that we've been able to do. And, we're pretty damn fortunate. Been pretty damn fortunate to be around really, really great people and have people buying into my vision. We're not trying to, come up with a cure for cancer, We're just trying to do good things for people and consumers and advisors and keep grinding it. So CTG.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us on the Breakthrough Advisor podcast today. This has been Ron Shurts. Thank you, Ron. Awesome job. It's a joy to talk to you every time.
Good to see you again.
Appreciate you jumping in. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of InsureMark. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.